Right. Today, I want to get a little bit controversial, possibly, and talk about some of my hills to die on. So, what's going on, Average Joes? I'm back here, and I want to talk about some things that I am a bit contrarian on or have some either hot takes, and I might be stubborn on as well, but they are my hills to die on. So, what I mean by that is I have views about stuff that I think most people won't share. And I'll just preface that once 100% right now that these are just my own thoughts and opinions on something, take them at for what they will. And this is also just completely for fun to spice it up a bit and do something different on the channel. But I'm consider these some of my hills to die on, thoughts and feelings that I am kind of adamant about, feel fairly strongly about. But if you feel otherwise, that's cool too. We can still be friends. Uh, it's just for fun, but this is just things that I think of as I'm in the reading space more and more. So to start off, I'm just going to start, since some of them are very specific, other ones are going to be a bit more vague or what have you. But starting off, first one I'm going to have, because it's the first one that I wrote down, and I think it almost inspired this video, and that is the Reckoners trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. I thoroughly enjoy, and I find that it is actually very good. Now, most people that have read it, especially on BookTube, will read it and hate on it big time, especially because this goes back to expectations of books. You know, you go in to these highly hyped up book series, and if they don't meet the hype, then you're disappointed. Well, people go into reading the Reckoners like it's going to be another Mistborn or Stormlight, and they're disappointed. That's not it, and that's not what it was intended to be. You know, Stormlight and Mistborn are part of his um Cosmere magnum opus, huge, epic, awesomeness, final like main focus. I think this was just a really fun in between creative writing read or writing book that he put together early on in his career. And sometimes you need some of those, you know, even though he's working on his giant Cosmere thing, sometimes writers need their own palate cleansers as well. And I'm not trying to diminish the trilogy at all, because it was still awesome in my opinion. My wife loved it as well, but it's just a fun superhero take on superheroes. It is a superhero read. It takes place in our world, so it's right off the bat, it's low fantasy. I think that's his only low fantasy or one that isn't in their own new world, but it is a futuristic world of ours where this event called Calamity happens, and some people are given superpowers. And it's kind of like, if you've ever seen the show The Boys on Amazon, on Amazon Prime, is these superheroes are evil. They are bad. And the more they use their powers, the more evil and bad they are. And they rule the world. So it's kind of a very realistic view of, if random people were given these crazy superpowers, they'd probably be bad. They'd probably get power hungry and drunk on power and run the world and ruin the world. And they would, it was it's a very realistic view of, you know, one would go, the most strongest one would come in, take over a city. Other people would challenge them. They would kill them or get rid of them so that their power isn't challenged. They'd have their posse, and then now they are the government. They run the each city, and each city has their own shortcomings and faults. And while the city is being run under their thumb, they might neglect other things like power, like water, waste treatment, every food, all of these things these cities suffer from, because the person in power doesn't care. They're getting theirs. They're satisfied. They don't care about the people below them, and people below them don't have superpowers, so they can't do anything about it. So that's kind of like the main premise of the book, and why I think it is really, really great. Now, it is why it is. I think on his YA side, yes, and I think the biggest knock that people get is the main character. He is very goofy, very awkward, um, kind of childish, but I think there's a certain charm and what is it, humor to him and what he does. So one of the things, one main criticisms that I see is that this is one of those instances of insta love, even though it was just like him attracted to a girl and she didn't feel the same way, but like right away he sees her and he's just like smitten and all about her for the entire time. And while I do agree that is kind of a not, I mean, yeah, it's not great to ever see in a book. In context of who the character is, it makes sense because this dude grew up alone, an orphan, basically. He works alone as a kid in factories in this crappy city because the superheroes took over, and he lives alone, and he spends all of his time and energy researching and making portfolios and profiles of all of these supers to then try and take them down, because every super has a weakness, and if you can find out their weakness, then they can be taken down. And he wants to seek vengeance on the one that killed his dad. So he spends all of his time with himself, by himself, and never ever interacts with or talks with any other girl. And he's a teenager himself. I think he's like 15 or 16 in this. And just think about a 15 or 16-year-old boy, never interacted or talked with a girl, and now here is a slightly older girl who is showing interest in him. Of course he's going to be smitten. Okay, that's going to happen. That is actually pretty realistic in my opinion. I mean, to the extreme it's a bit much, but he's just socially awkward and goofy in himself. He's a very positive minded, go get him kind of guy, and he just feels really strongly about her, So I think it's the first positive thing that happens in his life, and he's smitten. So I don't think there's that much of a knock if you really think about it, in my opinion. And then he's also he has all of these sayings or turns of phrase and metaphors that don't land for a lot of people, but I find a lot of them absolutely hilarious. He does do too many of them. They get a bit old at times, but there are some that are really, really funny. I don't highlight a whole lot in books, and especially like I definitely don't do highlighters in books, but on Kindle you can highlight phrases. This trilogy, I have so many of his metaphors highlighted because they are hilarious, and also because I do that in real life. I change common metaphors to suit my own, change the wording a little bit, which makes more sense to me. And that's basically what he does. He makes up these phrases and it makes sense to him, and people are like, what? That doesn't make any sense. It's like, no, if you think about it, it's this, this, and this. And it's like, you're so weird. Yeah. So in that regard, it's really fun and it makes a lot of sense. All of the different kinds of powers are really cool, and the mystery behind the calamity and all of that is very good as well. So the biggest knocks, it is the main character 100%, but the two I just explained, two of the reasons why I think he's actually not that bad. So First Hill to Die On is Reckoners is actually very good and very fun. And no, it's not going to be a Mistborn or a Stormlight. So don't go in thinking you're getting an epic fantasy, because it's not even high fantasy. It's low fantasy. It takes place in our world. All right. Completely different. Don't let hype ruin an experience. Next one, Hill to Die On is, and this is the number one reason if I was thinking about reading a book, this is probably the number one reason why I wouldn't read it or put it down or push it off. And that is when people say that you need to read a book more than once to get it or to really appreciate it. And so if you're reading a book and you have all these questions and going, I don't understand this, why is this happening, why and all these stuff, and people respond with, it's fine, you're meant to be like that, it'll make more sense or be better when you go on a reread or read it again. And I'm just like, nope, don't care. To me, if you have to read a book more than once, then it wasn't written well the first time. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying, and that is you can't appreciate a book more if you read it a second time. Going back to, not to bring up Brandon Sanderson too much in this video, but in Mistborn, there is a whole lot that is discovered in the original trilogy. If you were to reread that, I could see enjoying it even more because of all the little nuggets you can pick up on as you go. But you still enjoy it the first time reading it. It is still an amazing trilogy the first time. You can just appreciate it in a different light the second time. If you have to read something and you're still confused and it's like, and just things didn't line up well or make that much sense, and you have to read it again to be like, oh, okay, that makes all sense now. No, that's terrible. That, to me, that is bad writing because you have to read a book more than once. If I'm going to pick up a book, I want to read this book and I want to enjoy this book. I don't want to pick it up and go, okay, cool, guess I got to read it again to really get it. No, that's just sounds like a chore and sounds like a pain. Get out of here with that. Okay, it seems like that's what people are running into when it comes to Malazan and some other. See, I think I've heard it with Lord of the Rings. Like people say, your first read through, you'll like it some, but I think the second one is when you really begin to appreciate it. And I'm just like, well, no, I'm not interested in reading that twice if I have to for appreciating it. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I haven't read Lord of the Rings yet. I know it's not that great a reason. I'm still going to read it at some point, but still, 100%, you shouldn't have to read a book more than once to appreciate it, to get it, to know what the heck is going on. It's not a Christopher Nolan movie. Okay. I get that. Those movies are 2 hours long. You can just do that real quick. It's a movie. But for books take up way too much time to have to do it twice. So that's one of mine. I will be much less likely to read a book if you say that you have to read it more than once to really understand and get it. Okay. Next one. Animated narrators do books wrong. I think, to me, this is a more, I guess, a more personal preference, but it is my hill to die on. That is, if a narrator does way too many voices and way too many inflections and does way too much in his narration in the characters' voices, then it pulls too much away from the book. Being a narrator to me is like the telephone game. You have a message, you pass the message, and you pass the message, and you pass the message. You need to pass that message perfectly to us listeners so that we get what the author wanted us to get. But when you animate too much in your narration, then it's like a couple of down the line, because you are basically taking what the narrator gave or the author gave you and going, you know what? I'm going to make this character this way. I'm going to make this character this way and give them this voice. And then that voice has an impact on listeners to then picture a character a certain way, but that's really not how they are. I ran into this issue big time on listening to Brent Weeks's Black Prism, the Lightbringer series. Yeah, I DNF'd that first book twice, and while I love the world, love the magic system, the narrator's voice took me out of it. And I know that the narrator that did it is a beloved narrator. People absolutely love him, but there was a voice that he kept doing. There was like a general, I think he manipulates red. There was a general in the book that he would do the voice, and the general himself is supposed to be this large, imposing, intimidating warrior guy. But the voice that I heard was a decrepit old man. So whenever this warrior general would be a badass and imposing, I just heard and saw this decrepit, crotchety old man, and that's what I was picturing. I'm just like, how the hell is this guy doing this? Because shouldn't he just be like he sounds not that? And it just kept taking me out of the story. And then it's happened with a bunch of other books as well. Like I think it was Lifelike by I think it's Jay Kristoff or something like that. The voices for things like that just sounded way more juvenile than they needed to be, and it completely took me out of the story. So 100%, a lot of the audiobook narration or DNFs that I have to do with the narration and the narrator just doing too much. I think James Marsters and Jefferson Mays, fantastic jobs with the Dresden Files and Expanse, because they do the voices. They have distinctions, little inflections, but they're just telling you the story. They're doing a little bit of voice here, a little bit of voice here to tell the difference. But at the end of the day, it's still a similar voice. That they're not. I'm not picturing a narrator talking with like sunglasses on, and then when they do another voice, they're turning around and putting a hat on, and then turning another again and putting a fake mustache on as they're doing the voices, like they're really trying to act like and get into these characters' heads. I don't need a theater production of an audiobook. I just want you to read me the book and give me a little bit of distinction in the voices. So narrators that do too much. Okay, next one. This one this one might be the most flack because I know people love it, but this is just how I feel. Flowery prose is just a poetic info dump. Now, what I mean by this is when you have go into a scene, a setting, and the author writes pages and pages of descriptions of the setting and the area. Building a world and building the setting and picturing it is fantastic, and you can do that in a very good way. And this isn't saying that flowery prose are bad, because some people can do them really, really well and just completely captivate you. I know sometimes, Stephen King and some others have really good, well, I guess I wouldn't call it King flowery, but still prose. If you can really describe it and captivate a reader to pick up and listen and view this world in their eyes. But there are still some and plenty of times where it comes off as an info dump. And just think about that in general. think about info dumps. So people that love, I think, flowery prose actually hate info dumps. That's probably why this one will be a little bit hot. So think of when you have an author that does their big info dumps, they're telling you about the world, the political systems, the magic system, whatever. They're giving you information to understand the story. So that is probably a key part of the story that they're telling you. So they want you to know, they want you to cut up. I don't mind info dumps; they're fine to me. Some people don't like them. Some people want them to weave it in. Well, I'm on the other side of that, to where if you love your flowery prose, you're going into a setting to where, like, I want the author to really paint me a picture of the setting. To me, they're just going on and on and on about what they're seeing, and really like info dumping their world to you. And I think it can be better done to weave it into a narrative as things are happening. Instead of walking into a garden and describing how the paved stones are cut and what these flowers, how high they are, and what the colors remind you of, and what the smell is, and then how as farther down there's a breeze and it does this, that, and the other, and all of these things, these layers of, the trees in the background look like this and they're shaped like this and you're feeling like this. Instead of doing that for several pages, you can have somebody walk in and go, oh, I noticed that, noticing the paved stones, they're cut like this. And then you walk a little bit and they're talking to someone, you have change a few lines, and then go, oh, as I was saying this, I smelled this, and this flower caught my attention, and it looks like this, reminds me of this. And then they're walking again, and then they're doing something, and then they're seeing something else. That to me is weaving it in the narrative versus going on and on about describing this in flowery prose is info dumping still. So take that for what you will. It's fine if you don't, if you have, I'm going to be a little bit contrarian on that regard, but to me, it's still info dumping. And like I said, I like info dumping when it comes to, I don't mind it when it comes to actually the world, the magic system, and everything like that. So it's just a matter of preference, but it's still info dumping when you're just going on and on and on about a setting and nothing else is happening. Next, books and enjoying books. So this one's just kind of whatever, and just more about me is I will enjoy and read a book no matter how it is, what version it is, whether it's paperback, mass market paperback, hardcover, used, on Kindle. Obviously audiobooks already went over that. That has its own um, medium, but when it comes to reading a book, I don't need it to be a special edition. Whatever, people complain about what this book cover is, and you need this book cover, and this ones don't match up. And while like it's an OCD kind of thing, the words in the pages are still the same. That's why I'm a big audiobook or audible. God damn it. That's why I'm a big Kindle reader, because the words are still going to be the same on Kindle as they are going to be in your limited edition press. And now collecting books and having the visual books on your shelf, I do agree, look great and are great to have. But book collecting is completely different than book reading. And if I want to read a book, then I'm going to go cheapo, just buy whatever's cheap and read the book. Go to used bookstores, buy their mass market paperback, get them for a couple of bucks. On Amazon, I always buy books on used because you can go get them for like $2 to $3, and then shipping is like $3. So $5 to $6 for however many books you want to get. It's fantastic. Kindle sales and all that as well. The books are still going to be the same. I will also never buy two editions of the same book because I'm not a book collector. So I understand why people like to collect books. They are fantastic. I do love having books around, and I do own a crap ton of physical books, probably more than we should. But I don't need a special edition. The words on the pages are still going to be the same. The experience of reading that book is still going to be the same no matter how I read it. You could print it out on loosely pieces of paper, and I could just flip through a binder and read it the same. It's all the same words. It's all the same story. And my last one, say this one for last. This is just kind of a nitpicky thing with just me, and it's to the end because less likely people are going to fall off and not pay attention to it anyway. And that is just the wording of, this is more of a booktube thing, not a book thing. And that is the wording and the phrase readathon, I think, is used improperly. I think what people mean is reading challenges. And like I said, it's super nitpicky for me. But that tail end athon, like when you have a marathon, a telethon, triathlon, those are endurance events. Those are nonstop endurance events. Readathons typically are 30 days. You pick books, you read books, and then see how many prompts you can get off for the books you read. That's a challenge to me. You are challenged to read X amount of books you're challenged to read this prompt with this prompt with this prompt with this. To me, a readathon would be more like, hey, today we're going to read 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours. How many pages can you read in 8 hours? That is a readathon to me. But how people use readathons, to me, that's a reading challenge, because you are challenged to read this book, and then by this author, by this type of cover, by this thing, and that. So very small, nitpicky, just kind of a me brain, that the athon at the end is signifies endurance. Um, when you do a telethon, they're taking calls for 24 hours for whatever charity they're doing, and that is the athon part. They're not doing 30 days of, hey, within these 30 days, call this, and we're having this fundraiser that we're running for 30 days. It is, hey, we're manning the phones for 24 hours. This is what's happening. Do this now. It is, what can we do in this short window? So that is very, very nitpicky. It doesn't really matter one way or the other. I just like to note it, but I don't really care either way. So I'm interested to see what comments I get on this video, because these are fairly hot takey, contrarian, aggressive. I don't know, but I'm interested. I'm kind of mildly interested to hear what people have to say about this. But yeah, hey, if you disagree, let me know. I don't really care. It's just my opinion. Like I said, you have your opinion. Nobody's right. Nobody's wrong. I am certainly not right in any of this. So this is just how I feel. And let me know what your thoughts are on some of these. And let's have a discussion. Let's debate a little bit. And we'll get back to some regular book videos in the next one.